we always joke that you've been doing product way before product was considered cool.
Yeah, yeah,
So
that's
tell
true.
us a little bit more about your story.
So I started out on the internet in 2003 doing sort of internet marketing, and we were mostly focused on social media and SEO in the early days and driving traffic for other people. And then we quickly realized that we were able to make money doing that and being consultants, but what we really wanted to do was build our own products. And so then we started building different products. My co-founder and I, neither of us are sort of engineers, and so we back then, so we basically just started building things, started hiring people in about 2004, 2005, and we built about a dozen products in less than a year, and then got what I call lucky with one called Crazy Egg, and that one was launched in 2005, and it's still around. It's a mostly self-service business where people just sign up and pay online, which 15 years ago wasn't really a kind of a well-known model. Most of the time, if people signed up online, they'd sign up for a demo. And we used to have a free plan back then too. We don't have one right now. And we basically just started growing the thing, and it worked compared to a lot of the other things that we tried. So 11 others didn't work, but that one did.
Cool. And another big hit was Kissmetrics.
Yeah, that was about 3 years later. We were building a second analytics product and decided to sort of call it something different. And we actually, so Crazy Egg was self-funded, and it still is. Kissmetrics was venture backed. And that was just a long journey. I left the company about 4 or 5 years ago, actually longer than that, probably 6, 7 years ago. But that was a good ride too.
So, and what are you up to these days?
I have a new company that I started with a new co-founder, and that company is called FYI. And the idea of the company is to basically solve the biggest problem that we found when it comes to information and documents, especially at work, but also in your personal lives, which is basically finding them across all the different services that you use, including your phone and your desktop. There's just files and documents everywhere. And today, the concept of a file or a document is kind of, questionable, considering that you have all these cloud services and there's so many different tools. The way we think about it is, even if you're using and centralized on, let's say, Google Drive, someone sends you a link from some other tool, whether it's like Airtable or Notion or Coda or even a Dropbox link, all of a sudden you're using multiple tools, even if it's just one document or one file from the other tools. And our whole goal is to help you find this information in a way that isn't just like you having to type in a search box, because that's how a lot of other folks have sort of tried to solve the problem, which is just provide a search box. We've provided an experience that opens in every new tab in Chrome, and helps you essentially click around the interface to find what you need instead of just searching. We also have a search box, of course.
So now there's a lot of education and frameworks around product management. One of the big mottos is that you have to fall in love with the problem and not the solution. You've built a lot of different products. So how do you go about falling in love with certain problems?
Yeah, so I think like you actually need to, in some ways, fall in love with the problem that people have. So the part that's not really described a lot is this idea that people have this problem. So there are actually a lot of problems in the world that people just don't have, that you could like at a like meaningful scale or a meaningful pain. So there's as many people as there are on the planet times 100. So that's like a trillion, 7 trillion, whatever, 8 trillion. There's a lot of problems in the world. And there's almost an unlimited amount of problems. And the reason that I think people say this is because over time, as people change, behaviors change, technology changes, the way to solve problems evolves. I think the mobile phone is probably one of the biggest examples that we have in recent times, but really probably the biggest that we've ever had, which is we thought we were working from these laptops and computers. Then all of a sudden we got a phone in our pocket that's really a computer in our pocket. that completely was a paradigm shift. And so the key about problems is that if you're married to the problem and the people that have the problem in that way, then you're focused on the right thing, regardless of how the world changes. And then you don't get caught up in like, this is the solution, this is the solution. There's only one way to solve this problem. You're more caught up in, this is the problem. How is it evolving? What are the best ways to solve it, regardless of where the sort of what we're doing today. So a good example of this is 2 years ago, we built a search box in 5 days that searched 5 or 6 different services in real time. When you typed it in, it went and searched and showed you a bunch of results. We did that in order to understand why the folks and the tools and the products that came before us failed at building a search box. We learned a lot about a search box. Now it's 2 years later. We're actually revisiting that search box because we think that a lot of things have evolved in the last 2 years related to the type of solutions that would work, that we might build more into our search box now. We might actually make the search box smarter. We think that there's a paradigm shift that has happened in the last couple of years that makes it so that in order to solve the problem of finding documents, we need to evolve our own service so it goes beyond just the interface that we have today. We need to make our search better because there are smarter ways to make that search something very effective for people and expand our offering in that way, and also make sure that we're always solving the problem better than anyone else. So the companies that win solve problems better than any alternative that exists. That's why you need to fall in love with the problem and the people that have the problem.
I really like that additional caveat of not just the problem, but the people who have that problem, and make sure that there are a lot of people who really care in order to get some scale. So we were joking at the beginning that you've been building products for a long time, even before product management was hot or cool. What do you think is going on in the world? Why are there so many people who want to break into product or work in product?
I think some of that has to do with the myth that it's a really exciting job. I think it's a very challenging job. It's a job where if you're doing it well, you're learning new things about yourself and your customers and your business and your potential customers and the market and a number of competitors, alternatives, all these things all at once. And you have to fit it all in your brain. Even if you write things down and have lots of documentation, you still have to fit it and make these fantastic connections on how to define problems, find problems, and solve them. So there's an exciting aspect of it for sure on the surface. But when you dig into the work required to like win and actually win the customer love, it is a chore. It is a bunch of taking out of trash, equivalent. It is a thing where like sometimes, you might wake up and be like, oh, like it sucks. Like I didn't make progress yesterday, right? Or the amount of stuff I did, I have no idea if it's going to work. And then you have these constant learnings because on top of everything I said, the world is changing constantly to the point where like what solution you have today, customers might become dissatisfied with tomorrow. And that is a very challenging type of job. And so what I like to say about it is like, if you want to get into product, you're going to learn more than probably any other type of role that you have in a company besides founder, CEO. And I say specifically founder, CEO, not just CEO. And the reason for that is that you are thrown so many different inputs and have to filter, synthesize, analyze, and then help the team with influence, not control, go do their jobs for not you, but the customer. And a CEO founder has the same responsibility at a very like deep level. And a product person, regardless of like product manager, director, VP, CPO, all the way down to even a designer, and not down, but like down meaning like they're really in the weeds designing, making pretty pictures, I like to call them, to our designers, and they laugh at me because they're not pretty pictures, of course. They're more than that. They're usable pictures. They're pictures people have to interact with. But anyway, that's a sidebar. So I think like you kind of see this problem that occurs where it's like exciting, because if you don't know about it, you're like, oh, I get to build this thing. I get to build this type of thing, this software or this physical good. But the amount of effort that goes into it and multidisciplinary sort of thinking and coordination with other people with influence, not control, is remarkable, you know, that we can even do this, because it is a such a multifaceted, complex sort of discipline, you know, and that's why I'm so happy that, you know, product school exists. You have a great name and branding, and are really moving this sort of forward with kind of everything you folks do, because I think it's much needed. It used to be easier. When we launched Crazy Egg in 2005, we could pop up anything and people would just use it because they'd never seen a heat map that helps you see where people click, because that's what Crazy Egg does. But now, like, every product has that feature that we sort of help pioneer that category. Same with Kissmetrics. We pioneered a bunch of stuff there. A lot of other products have that. If you think about smartphones and Apple, they did the same thing. They built this phone that's really a computer in your pocket that you can like touch, and there's no keyboard. And everybody thought they were crazy, or not everybody, but a lot of people thought pretty much everybody thought they were crazy, even the people that bought the phone. And like, now look at us, like, a keyboard on a phone? Are you kidding me? And like, it's those kind of like world changing, game changing things that I live for, you know, personally. And it's also those kind of things that now are harder than ever to create, because a lot of the opportunities are either taken up or we've just evolved beyond having like basic, simple, like CRUD type of products. You can look up CRUD on Wikipedia, but it's just like an interface with a database, right? We're beyond that. Like, these things have to do so many other things now. So that's my long rant on sort of your question there.
And I keep smiling because as a former, I would say as a product person, at the end of the day,
you're still a product person.
I'm a product person. He just happened to be, you know, have a different title or try to tackle problems from a different angle. But at the end of the day, I think that is a mindset that gets you excited. And it's also, it's counterintuitive, because like, why are you punishing yourself so much sometimes? Like, you sometimes don't need to continue building or to continue putting yourself out there, but there's some sort of reward about just making that type of impact that keeps some of us hooked. But I also want to explore this thing that you said about product management and founder CEOs. Obviously, at the very beginning of companies, your company is pretty much your product. And that's why I think we see a lot of founder CEOs who come from a product background. But as the companies evolve, what do you think? Why do you think that there are so many founder and CEOs who are product managers? What is some of those overlap in terms of skills that you think are helpful?
I think the number one skill is learning how to work with other people. And it's back what I kept saying, which I didn't dive into, but I'm happy to. Like, in a lot of roles, you have control over the outcome. You have control over the inputs, control of the output. So there's inputs, outputs, outcome. And outcome is more like your goal or intended, like, desired state for a customer. And input and output are kind of obvious, which is like, you do a bunch of stuff, you get an output. So like, for example, if you're in marketing, you do a bunch of ads or you do a bunch of content, there's traffic, and then the output is like, you know, some generation of leads, and then the outcome is the number of leads you wanted to generate and whether you hit that or not, just in a simplistic model. With product development, for the longest time, because it was easier, you just pop something up, get a bunch of traffic to it, and learn and all that. The bar was lower at those three things. And now the bar is much higher. And so the skill set of being able to coordinate and have people actually do meaningful work towards a specific outcome is just about coordinating with people. You don't have the same control that you do in marketing. You have a lot of influence, but you don't have very much control over like so many different aspects of the puzzle, right? Especially if you're building software products or even hardware products. Hardware these days also incorporates software a lot of the time. So then it's even more complex, but like, it's like almost like supply chain and resource planning and things like that are now such an important sort of, it's not like you call it that, but that's essentially what you're doing. You know, we think of a lot of what we do as like a factory and an assembly line on product, so that we can just make the actual like step-by-step process very clear to everybody on the team. And then the innovation and brainstorming and all that is how we sort of create things that are either unique or right for the market or right for the customer, whatever we care about as a business. But really, it's a factory and it's assembly lines, somewhat complex, right? When you think about research and all the different methodologies, analysis of that research, turning it into mock-ups and wireframes and designs. And even then, the hardest part, which is newer in my mind today in a different way, is this idea of coordination between core product folks and engineering. And when you really think about that, the amount of influence a product person has and needs is the key. Because if you can't influence people, you won't get stuff done. And that's one of the challenges of product as a category, even if you're a user experience designer or a product designer or anything like that, not just PM or head of product. And that's the same type of influence that you learn as a CEO, as a founder, compared to control. Because even a CEO founder doesn't control much, and influence is the game, right? So it's like, how do I influence everyone to make the best decisions for the customer that we possibly can that align with our business outcomes?
I completely agree. And coming from an engineering background, I think that's why there's a big misconception around why product managers need to be technical or engineers. And obviously that's one way, but that's not the only way. And but no. I believe that every product person needs to be somewhat technical or technical enough to earn the respect and be able to have a conversation.
I would challenge that and say that, like, we're using the wrong word when we use technical, because that implies a lot of different things that make product managers feel, usually inadequate, and make engineers feel like they can't relate to someone who's called themselves technical, who's not technical because they can't write code. So I think my take on it is actually much different. My take on it is it's all about one's ability to learn really fast and learn in many different ways. So audio and video at 2x speed is actually pretty critical skill set in my opinion. Speed reading is interesting, but really it's about speed comprehension that I think I would suggest people level up on. And then the third thing, to me, is like, kind of the way to learn is like by asking great questions. And that can be to a person, or when you read something, you're asking great questions. And those things culminate in this idea of being able to connect dots that, most people wouldn't connect, or that are just seemingly unrelated, but actually are related. And so those are the concepts. Now, my sort of funny way of saying this is I can out Google any engineer you bring in front of me for even a problem that they have, because a lot of engineering is finding the answer to a somewhat really nuanced problem. This is why Stack Overflow is so popular, because you can go in there, perform a search, and get a really good idea of the different options on how you can solve a problem that you may have or you may notice as an engineer. So I don't think it's technical. I think it's this ability to have really great conversation, treat everything as a learning opportunity, and be able to speak to people who are not the same skill set as you. And so I know we're saying the same thing, but the word technical is not correct if you're not technical. So I don't consider myself technical. I'm not an engineer. I like to say I fake it, because I can talk to any type of engineer for any type of product or business and make meaningful progress with them in whatever area that we're talking about, simply because I'm able to break down the problems to their core and then work my way from there. And I even find that highly technical people aren't necessarily the best at that, because a lot of these things are in their heads, and they probably have a way higher IQ than I do to consume all this, but they're not always able to distill it down to its simplicity. So what I bring out is like trying to get down to the basics and then have common language that's simple enough and build from there. So yes, I do favor engineers who I can talk to, and they will explain things to me, the basics of them. But I consider it my job to figure that out, because a lot of times these highly technical individuals need help thinking through problems from a customer lens. And so that's what I'm bringing to the table. I wouldn't call it technical. I think it's just the ability to speak to folks, influence, ask the right questions, all those sorts of things.
I think that's a fantastic point. Vocabulary creates our reality. So the more we can demystify certain words, the better. So thank you for bringing that up. Hidden, you are obviously mentioning learning constantly, and I can see you're passionate about learning, and I believe it's a key skill for anyone who wants to grow. So what are some of the things that you are now learning in order to continue growing your company and also growing as a person?
Yeah, I think a lot of the ways to do customer centric and value centric sort of sales has changed quite a bit because of a lot of the tools that exist and that are out there. And so one of the things that I'm focused on right now is learning to sell whatever I have, regardless of what's coming next or what we don't have as a business. And it's just something that I find helps me a lot with product. So the thing I'm trying to learn and working on it, I'm learning it. I'm not just trying. I don't like the word try, but I use it sometimes. Is basically, how do you take sales as a big input, probably one of the most important inputs? So like, what will people buy? How do you learn what they'll buy, not just what they'll use, or not just what they need and not just what they want? It's what are they going to buy? And that's been sort of the thing that I'm very much focused on right now, personally.
And how do you block time to do that?
I focus on energy, not time. So if I have energy for something, I do it. If I don't, I'm very hesitant about it. So for me, it's very much about energy, not about time. I think you make the time for things you have energy for, not the other way around.
Mm-hmm.
You don't create new energy. You don't, just like you don't create time, but you have to pick like which one you focus on. So a lot of folks focus on time. So they use Pomodoro technique or this new thing with marbles and like moving marbles and stuff like this, which is totally fine. For me though, it's like if I have energy for it, the time doesn't matter because I'll just keep going. A lot of people call like, you know, do you have, can you get in a flow state? Things like that. For me, it's just energy. Like I don't have energy to learn programming. I would love to. I'm sure I can make the time if I had the energy. I'm never probably going to, even though I threaten it to our engineers and all kinds of people. But at the end of the day, I really feel like it really is about energy, not time.
One of the things that I believe that contributed to make product management a discipline and have more structure is the amount of technology around it. Back in the day, we didn't have tools built for PMs. It was, I don't know, PowerPoint, spreadsheets, or whatever we could piggyback from other teams. Now, obviously, there's its own category. You have product analytics, A/B testing, heat maps, anything almost. So what would you say are the best ways to make sense out of almost too much technology these days?
Yeah, I disagree, first of all. And the reason I disagree is the tools aren't the end goal. The outcome for customers is the end goal. And I think the tools have made it worse. And the reason they've made it worse is they make you say statements like that, which I just don't agree with. I've been doing it so long. I don't care what the tool is. I really don't. What I care about is what are the processes? What are the frameworks? What are the mental models that you use to deliver value to customers? That's what matters. And so many people focus on the tools because there are so many in every category product. That being said, I love that there are so many tools. I hate that people start with tools because I think that's a wrong approach. You have to start with what the process is and what are you trying to accomplish and what are you trying to refine? Where are the inefficiencies before you worry about the tools? That being said, I love that there are tools. I just don't think that's helped product management in the way that, you know, a lot of people think it has, including the analytics tools, including any of those things. And the main reason is product people have opinions and philosophies about how to do product. The tools oftentimes dictate those philosophies. And so they make it worse. Because, like, a good example, right, is now the folks at Basecamp, so this is X37 Signals, have invented their own process called ShapeUp. I've thoroughly consumed it. I like so many parts of it, but it's their vernacular. And then they invented a hill chart, and then they put it in their product. So now, and their product's lovely, where if you don't use the hill chart, it doesn't matter. But you have to go learn this hill chart. You have to go learn ShapeUp, and then you can use Basecamp to do product management really well, because they were solving a problem they had with a tool that they were working on, that they built, and now they want more product people using Basecamp, not just consultants, agencies, and freelancers, right? And so you have to think about the evolution of these things and the intention behind people's goals. So yes, it's great. Like if I were getting into building product today, I would look at ShapeUp and everything that Basecamp's sharing. I've been in product a long time, so I can see the pure bullshit in half the stuff that they write in there, just like the pure bullshit in most of the stuff. And by bullshit specifically, what I mean is the stuff that doesn't matter that they're putting in there for their own purposes. And if you find it valuable, it's not bullshit to you, and that's totally fine. And there's different bullshit in these things to each other, but I just specifically use that word because this is product people. They have come up with their own way of doing things, right? And so they're going to think half the crap in something else is bullshit. And I don't really believe it is. Like I said, if I were starting out, one of the first places I'd look is a combination of what you folks are providing, because it gives you a lot of tactical and strategic ways to think about how to, like, you know, do research and make mock-ups and learn and all this stuff. And then I'd look at what the Basecamp folks have put out to basically see if I believe in their philosophies. But they have like arbitrary things, just like everybody else, like 6-week cycles and then burn down periods. And all of it is an evolution from agile and pre-agile, which is waterfall. So if you know the history of this stuff, you're like, I know where they got that from. I know why they do it like that. And it's bullshit, because it's made up arbitrary stuff, right? So like even at our company, like we have this concept called step one. And that's because we want to distill down a meaningful start to something potentially massive that we just don't know enough about until literally customers are using it. And so we build it down to like the core that we believe is the right start of something after doing tons of research and trying to figure out what step 20 or step 1000 is. And then we come down to what's step one that gets the potential to go in the directions we might need to, right? And that work cannot be more than 40 hours of one engineer's time. Again, more bullshit, but it's my bullshit, so I believe it. So I think, you know, just find what you resonate with, what you believe in, test different ways of doing things, but be flexible enough to innovate on the process, or not even innovate, iterate the process that works for you, your team, and most importantly, the type of product you're building and the type of customers you have. So, and if you're new to product management or even like mid-career, you're not necessarily going to understand this because you're not exposed to enough of the philosophies, although you can be now really fast and then form your own opinion. But here's the thing, we wouldn't have a step one or the 40-hour chunk. We wouldn't have done it in 2005. We wouldn't have done it in 2008. We wouldn't have done it in 2015. We're doing it in 2020 because we believe for our customer, our type of product, that is the way to do it. And that's just my belief. And it is BS to somebody who says, oh, I need 6-week cycles and people burn out and you need this time to like fix like bugs and stuff like that. Cool. That's just not how we do it. We do it differently. And there's going to be pieces of it that we use too. So this is product management. Because you're building products, you're also constantly like reevaluating and tuning and changing your way of building product. And any PM or any product person is greatly influenced by whatever their previous experience is and what they really resonated with. But all of it's BS. Like you're going to have to figure out what works for you, your team, your customer base, and the type of product you're building.
And I absolutely love this. Actually, so thank you for sharing it like it is. So take me to 2025, 2030. Where do you think are the biggest opportunities for product people?
I think all products turn into commodities over time. All you're trying to figure out is what's the thing that's not a commodity yet, but will become one that we need to execute on. So I would learn a lot more about commoditization, because that's the thing that doesn't change. Everything becomes a commodity if it's popular enough. For example, Apple doesn't have the highest market share of phones. but they're the single company with the most profit in the market. And I think most revenue, but don't quote me on that. Definitely most profit, I can very confidently say. But the phone market's commoditized because they figured something out that's good. And now you can buy a phone that you tap on and you touch without Apple involved at all. And it's not just Android and Apple and iOS. There's also the Windows Phone still, right? And probably some random ones I don't know about. And you have like Square, which I don't know what it's powered by, but that's another, it's not a phone, but they have a lot of touchscreen stuff. And you have Shopify's point of sale. So what happened? Touch became commoditized. So what ends up happening is if it's right for the customer, it will inevitably become commoditized. Learning how to realize that and then operate your product like for the long term in that way and build resilience to commoditization because you basically own the commoditization as much as possible is a incredible skill set. Very few people I've found have it, and I think it's going to become one of the most important skill sets. As an example, I think Facebook does this extremely well. Extremely well. I think Apple doesn't give a shit. They don't actually care. They just do what they do, and they do it really well. And I think Amazon is really internalized this, but the way they do it is by like, we're willing to make less money than you. You know, that's their answer to it. So I think Facebook, they have a saying, something like, you know, it's not just important to embrace change. It's necessary to essentially change. Like they basically say we're the equivalent of like, we need to be the thing that kills us. And you can see it. They paid $19 billion for WhatsApp. $19 billion for a company that wasn't making any money with like 50 employees or something. Huh?
Yeah. I mean, this is, I wouldn't say reality. It's fascinating to see, you know, how you think about the future. And I agree. I think that trying to think about building that next commodity or that next platform, it's something that we don't usually think on a daily basis, at least myself, and you know, put you in that situation with that time frame helps you try to take that step one that you were talking about before. So,
and I've lost. I've built two products that the feature set became commoditized in the same market, in the analytics market. I lost. I didn't do that well. So I am highly biased at thinking about this and trying to figure out how to avoid it or become a commodity and know that there's a platform or something that allows us to create the ecosystem so that if and when it gets copied, we are part of it. And that's where I failed a couple times. And so I'm biased, but also I don't think about 2030, 2025. I just don't. But you asked the question, and my only answer is basically learning how to like just think about markets in a way where, you know, if you create something great, it will become commoditized. And the last thing I'll say about this is like, Steve Jobs used to like say like, what's next every time after they did something great. And I think that that's the right mentality if you want to sort of figure out how to survive in the long run and make sure your products or your business, more importantly, more than your products, survive.
Thank you very much for your time, Hiren. Just to wrap it up, is there anything else that you would like to add?
No, I think thanks for having me and asking some questions that spurred some thoughts for myself too.
Thank you for giving some honest answers. It's been really, really amazing to have you on the show. Let's keep it up. We'll keep using
Thanks
your
for
product.
having me.
Bye.